Mediation is a golden opportunity to put aside acrimony and advance the common good when divorce or separation is imminent, or when conflict arises anywhere and disputes must be settled. Today, we're delighted to have divorce mediator Don Sinkov with us to tell us about his mediation practice and how the mediation choice was a wise one for him. Welcome, Don.
Nice to be here.
Why don't you give us a brief idea what your background is like?
I've been involved in mediation and arbitration for over 20 years. In 2003, I took a training in divorce mediation and understood why there was a tremendous need for divorce mediation for couples going through the divorce process. I have a number of friends who have been through horrible divorces, and it prompted me to take the training, and since 2003 I've been specializing in just divorce cases.
And you've been meeting for about how long? And how many cases have you done?
I've been mediating since 2003. I've mediated about 1,500 cases.
That's an incredible schedule. Did you work with the courts there?
I'm currently on the roster of neutrals for Westchester Supreme Court. They have a new mediation program that they started.
Roster of neutrals, they call it?
Yes.
Okay. Let's say that, just for the sake of the audience experiencing what it is your process is like, see if you can go through a minute or two of describing a client comes to you for mediation, and what can they expect to have happen in what order of events? There's an intake of some kind, and then go from there.
Yeah, generally what I do is...
A general experience, of course.
I do it a couple of different ways, and what I've learned over the years is that different couples need different things. So I will say, if you like, you can come in for 20 minutes or a half an hour. I won't charge you. We'll decide whether this is appropriate for mediation. And I'll come in and I'll get a feeling for the husband and wife and what their relationship is, what the dynamic is when they're in the room with me, how they talk to each other, the eye contact, the body language, all the signals, you know, that indicate how their relationship is going. And you know, if there's something there that becomes very obvious. If it is appropriate for mediation, I'll give them a list of documents they need to provide, and they'll bring those documents into the first mediation session, and then we'll get right down to work.
So you're kind of evaluating the couple on the fly as they go, in terms of how they represent themselves and in their needs.
Oh, absolutely.
Have they explained to you how they feel about what they need and want?
I'll tell them what the process is. I'll tell them how much it costs. I'll tell them how much time it takes. I'll tell them different ways to get divorced in New York. I'll question them as far as, you know, have they had any kind of settlement talks with each other before? Do they have an idea how they might want to divide things? Have they already come to a decision? Some clients come in, they've already decided everything, but they need to hear from me, and I'm obligated to tell them what's separate property, what's marital property, and how the court might look at a long-term marriage of a certain duration, and whether or not maintenance can be paid or should be paid, or how that figures into the whole picture.
And how would maintenance, well, child support is a specific percentage of gross income on how many children you have, right, in the family, how many a client may have. But maintenance is a floating dollar. Maintenance
is a very difficult subject to address, because there are 14 factors in maintenance, including factor 13, which is anything else the court deems relevant. Yeah. So, you know, it's a difficult conversation to have, but pretty much the golden rule is, if you have a 20-year marriage and you know, there is a tremendous disparity of income and, you know, relative position of the husband and wife, and where they're going to be 5 years from now economically, and all the other factors that goes into this, you know, there very well might be what they call durational maintenance, maintenance of a fixed amount of time and a fixed amount, so it doesn't look like equitable distribution, which you also have to be careful of.
Yeah, do you find that regarding the same subject, that the amount of time is very transient? Nobody really has any fix on what that time is. Do you find your clients are asking you what time is appropriate?
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I've learned is the purpose of maintenance is to get the non-working spouse back in the workforce and be self-supporting. So how long will that take, and how much money will that take? Mm-hmm.
What do you think is most important that a client looking for prospective mediator would want to have, be known? What would you like to tell them more importantly than most other things?
Well, first, in choosing a mediator, since there is no licensure in New York, mediators are not licensed, choose an accredited mediator. Mediator accreditation through the New York State Council on Divorce Mediation is the highest standard in New York right now. So choose an accredited mediator. That means they've gone through some level of testing and their agreements have been looked at, and they have more than 250 hours face-to-face mediation time. Get somebody who's experienced and understands the whole process. And you can do that by calling them up on the phone and talking to them and ask them questions. How long they've been doing this? How many cases have they done? Have they done police and firemen pensions? Do they understand military pensions? Your specific set of circumstances.
Sure.
So, is this somebody you can establish a rapport with and work with? Because you're going to have to work with them. Somebody you feel comfortable with.
Sure. That's wise. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions now that are rapid fire kind of question. You don't have to give them a lengthy explanation, but it's a comparative between the legal system in divorce and the private mediation practice and what the differences are. So I just want you to comment on, for instance, a couple abdicates decision-making to a lawyer or a judge when they're in court, and a couple takes responsibility for their own decisions when they're in mediation.
Okay, so how do you think somebody who doesn't know your family or your children or your living situation is going to make those decisions regarding your family and you?
And the communication between a couple is discouraged when you're in court, and the communication is the basis that decisions are made when you're in mediation.
The couple is in the driver's seat. When I do a mediation with them, I'll put them in the ballpark. I'll tell them, here are different scenarios you can choose, but this is your money, your life, your family, your children. You should be the one making these decisions, not somebody else.
Children suffer adverse effects of the battles between the parents while they're in court, and children benefit as a prime focus of a mediation. The good parental relationships are fostered, and that's part of the mediation process. We hold them at a different level, right? We hold the kids at a higher level.
Well, sure. It's about cooperating. How can you cooperate to become better parents? How can you cooperate so each of you can share as much time with the children as possible to continue your parenting role? How can you least disrupt the children's lives and become, good parents?
In terms of the learning process, what you've learned when you're in court and what you've learned in mediation in court, there's no new negotiation communication. There's none of it. Whereas in mediation, there's problem solving and negotiation is ongoing. So there's a lot more learning in that process, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I had a case in Supreme Court where, 2 years into the case, I was handed the case by a judge on the one day a year called Mediation Settlement Day. And I went into court and I got everybody in the room and I asked the husband and wife when we first started, when was the last time you spoke to each other? And they said, about 1.5 years ago. And I said, you know what? Now's a good time to start talking to each other. So what do you think is fair? And they started talking to each other. 6 hours later, we settled the case.
Yeah, that's so true. Also, what about the cost factors? There seems to be a huge difference between what's cost-related in the litigation process as compared to minuscule amounts in mediation process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a fraction. You're not paying 2 attorneys, you're not paying a law guardian. You don't have a process, a litigated process, where the average turnaround time from beginning to end of a case is 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years. I mean, you can imagine billable hours for that number of years, how much money you're talking about. If somebody sees me for 2 or 3 mediation sessions and my attorneys prepare the separation agreement and I have somebody that files the divorce papers for them and everybody gets paid directly, there are no middlemen in the process, this is a streamlined process designed to save you money.
And designed to have them created. Thank you very much, Don Sinkov. I appreciate it.